I would like to introduce first the panelists of tonight, very interesting people, and I'm very looking forward to have the discussions with them. I'm going to start with Peter. He sent me a lot of information about his life, so I had to choose, and I hope I picked the right ones. Peter Hermann is a social philosopher, and he's also an active member of the EuroMemo Group and organized this evening together with me. And I was very impressed. He, as a researcher and professor, lived and worked in I don't know how many countries. I will just name a few. Among them are Ireland, Italy, China, Germany, Poland, Finland, Sweden, Turkey, Taiwan, Austria, Australia, France, and Hungary. Very impressive. His methodological thinking had been and is still influenced by historical and dialectical materialism, system theory, and theory of civilization. And against his background, he undertook several studies, especially in the area of European integration. He has, of course, a rather critical position towards the subtle mechanisms of the process of European integration and towards traditional approaches of social policy, which pushed his analytical interest towards developing alternatives as well. He's also part of ATTAC Germany, of the Scientific Council, and as I mentioned, of the EuroMemo Group. Thank you for being here, Peter. Coming from Poland today.
Coming from Poland, yes.
Very welcome. I asked the panelists in advance to answer maybe a very broad but simple question. And maybe I want to start with you, Peter. I wanted to get your perspective, your view on what do you think, what policy intervention or idea or concept has been missing in the years after the crisis until now?
Well, to start with, I'm not sure about this after crisis. And when actually this crisis started, where we have to be precise, of course, in economics, where we have a certain date, that was Lehman Brothers, and something happened, and this was the catastrophe afterwards. But at the same time, I dare to have a very provocative, probably provocative thesis, and say that this was not a major event. What we are talking about is a crisis of neoliberalism. And this is going on for a long time. And I picked up, it was so nice with 69, or with a 9, 69, crisis of this capitalism running into serious trouble. Because this after World War II growth debate didn't work anymore. So then we have actually something I didn't know really this coincidence. 79 was first European Parliament, Simone Weil elected, and in the UK, Margaret Thatcher. So we have exactly this tension of the two systems. 89 was then the international so-called end of history, which was actually the beginning of a new history, including 99, the introduction of the euro currency and the European Central Bank. We have all these nice things, political, economic, and legal things, institutional settings that came under pressure and not. 2009 was then the G20 in London, which was the first time that they said, actually, 2009, we have a crisis and we have to be serious about dealing with it. So usually we say 2007, 2008, this was the banking crash, and then it happened. But 2009, not least the European leaders had been getting serious about it and said, we have to deal with it. They admitted something, and this is an interesting part, we as Europe have to take responsibility to some extent, saying actually the hegemonic role of the United States cannot continue in this way. And then we have something, of course, 2019, it's going on, who knows what happens, but actually one of the recent days, the European Council decided not to accept a European tax on digitization. So where is Europe? And what is the crisis? So we have an ongoing process where actually Europe is trying to find a way, and whatever this liberal had been about is completely lost, and it's going more and more to restructuring of the system in terms of a rather authoritarian way of dealing with things. And again, this is what you find in law, and this is what you find in economics, and not least then, when it comes to social rights. I had been here in Brussels kind of going in and out up to 10 years ago. We talked about the need of a rights-based approach to social policy. There is no rights anymore. This is very shallow what exists at this moment. And at the same time, I think we have, and this is with the crisis, this moment of it's going on that since then we have a permanent discussion on what is economy. You said before, I'm not an economist. I am. I don't know if it's a good thing or not. But it is something where we take for granted the mainstream economics as this is what economy is about. It's not. And this is, I think, a strong point we always try to pursue in the Euro memorandum. Economic policies is about what is relevant for people. And it is not to run a system. This is a self-referential system based on the idea of growth, based on the idea of inequality doesn't matter, but the system runs. Productivity, increasing productivity, GDP, we all know this from if you studied those who are economists know about it. It is about the self-referential system with scarcity. This is one of the points made. I have doubts that we can talk about scarcity. We live in a world of abundance. The question is, where is this abundance? Where are these resources and how are they used? The next thing is cost-benefit. We're always calculating costs and benefit. Again, I have my doubts, and I would say we are looking first at benefits in economics proper, and then we can think, what does it cost and who can we pay for it? But we should not look at the cost before. This is mainstream economics. Then we are looking at comparative advantage. This is going on since Ricardo. There is a huge benefit of cooperative advantage. And this is something where the European Union actually failed to put this into place and say, if we really closely work together, then we have an advantage. If we do what we do currently, mainstream, look at even the term, I won't repeat it here, Portugal, Italy, Greek, Spain, and who is the next one? I have my phone. This is what doesn't work, where we see the productive basis of European Union, of European policies, is undermined systematically. So we have increasing inequality not being addressed, being left to the so-called free market. The free market being highly regulated and the deregulation being highly regulated, but nobody talks about this. We are always talking about, yes, there is something, and this is going on in Ireland now. Apple owes Ireland 13 billion or 14 billion. And now the question comes, is it tax? Then it's okay. If it's subvention, it's not okay. We should talk about 13 million money, 13, I don't know actually if it's dollar or euro, that is owed to the Irish people and to the productive system globally. And then in this case, particularly Ireland. The last thing, incentive matters. Are we all idiots running around and calculating always, yes, I can do this and this cost me so much and then I leave it? People have other interests. And they are not behaving in this rational way, which is one of the considerations of economics. Everybody is rationally calculating what he or she does. We are made to this. This is to some extent true. And this is exactly this policy where we have this long tail. We are made to this, behaving in a wrong way, because we don't have basically another option. Just concluding there with this impressive list of countries, you can say as well it's a depressing list, because I know exactly what it means in terms of social security, in terms of the transferability of rights and all these things. It does not exist in this way that we can really say, yes, you are free. It's the same with freedom of movement as it is with freedom of capital. This is actually the only way. If you have large enough capital, this is free. Services are not free. All this is a disaster. And there, actually, the freedom that we have is really in a negative way, that we are ruining the social systems in Europe, are ruining each other mutually. Cooperative advantage would be something, and this is something we did not consider before the crisis, after the crisis, or during the crisis. Really to get together and change the fundamentals. So I leave it there for time.
Thank you, Peter. And this is basically all what I expected also from a social philosopher, to give us like a different perspective, a new angle on look at things.
Well, and economic. I think this is the important point that we cannot say really there is one and the other. That we have to think it. If I look at the last round here, we have the macroeconomic policies and EMU reform, weakening economy. What does it actually mean, the weakening economy? That it really undermines systematically the own potential forces that do exist in an integrated policy. So what we have is actually, if you go through the figures, you find huge differences. And of course, the most obvious case is what they did with Greece, to undermine systematically every potential that existed. And if we go to a global perspective, we can say we have had in some way the same thing there. The so-called developing countries, they did pretty well. As soon as they had been drawn into the global capitalist system, they failed. They couldn't cope with it. The same is now happening in Europe. You have the strong countries, the center of the center, and they do exactly this with the periphery in Europe, systematically ruining the potentials. And this is, if you look at Greece, this is the country where I know most from. If you look at the situation there, it was, of course, the economic downturn. You have had the hard figures there, but it was what was going on in the schools. Teachers not being well off, but having a little bit that they could feed the children, that they could go to school. And just one thing there, I think this is something we have to look at as well. It is not we and the people. This people-centered means really to think about our own situation. And now, having worked my life in academia, we see a systematic way of undermining education, what it is about. And I'm not talking only about higher education. I talk about as well what kids learn at school, what everybody still has to learn at school. If we look, you mentioned health system, it's this kind of permanent circle that is put into place of you start at some place and then you don't have an opportunity to get out. I don't know, I like this neoliberal socialism, I have to think about this. But it is, that's why I say it as well, it is something where we have to think what you said, we won't go back onto the old track. We need a systematic industrial policy, different to what the German government put forward, I don't know, one or 2 weeks ago. We have to think about cooperatives. We have to think about public, not only the public services and stuff, but we have had a system of public banks in many countries, and they did a good job in terms of investment. In terms of investment where? It's not just getting the ball rolling, but it is a selective process. And this is, yes, liberal is there, everything is left to whatever, and then it is not this fear of intervention, of selection. It's not just getting something done, but what are we going to do? And I think this is where we still have to work on quite a lot, and where we, I think, have to find a way together as well with those who are working mainly in the social, so-called social area, in the environmental area and so on. Well, I have the problem really that, and there I'm very self-critical as well, that we easily give in and accept short-term solutions, finding as well our own security. And if I look at what is going on in 2 areas where I'm kind of knowledgeable now, it's academia and the healthcare system. There is only one option, apparently, just muddling through, getting through, not saying what it is about, or at least not saying the entire truth. And this is, of course, a danger as well. And this is where, if we want to use this term, populism, where they succeed. They say whatever, in their opinion, is wrong, and they say, having this power position, actually don't bother, we just say it. And then people have to be confronted with it. And I think there is a little bit too little readiness on the left or on the broad left. And I want to emphasize this. It's not just the left as a kind of well-known circle, but it is a broad spectrum where people are agreeable if they are really made aware of the consequences. And not the consequences in very global terms, but what does it mean for you? Yes. What does it mean for your child, for your grandchild, when it comes to go to school or to the kindergarten? What does it mean for your employment? And this is not your individual employment, but this is all our employment when it comes to having a child not being able to look after that. We know and we emphasize this is a huge problem if you are applying for social benefit, and then there is this discipline, well, you have to decide, take this job or not. Take this job and neglect your child. Take this job, and I think there is something we have to be more provocative as well, and to say what the right actually does, there is something we have to pay.
But I think
Peter, I would invite you to speak some closing words, if you like.
Closing words, yeah. Well, you said something is happening, and I think this is important really to recognize in terms of the contradictions we have. And of course, it would be foolish to downplay any populist and right-wing movement in Europe. At the same time, I'm frequently wondering, currently being based in Poland, what is really the role of it, if you are living there? What is the power of it? Of course, there is a strong right movement. I experienced it as well in Italy as well, actually, with the beautiful 5 stars, and in Hungary. But at the same time, what is the role it plays in daily life? And I'm coming back in terms of economics. We have to think about daily life. In terms of politics, we have to think about these contradictions as well. And we have, of course, a strong populist movement. We have as well Erasmus students. There is some kind of Europe. And it's not only about Erasmus students, it's about Erasmus people, not Erasmus, sorry, it is about people working in the healthcare system in different countries. Of course, under miserable conditions in many cases, ruining the national systems, but it is as well a potential, I think, which we can and have to mobilize in our own and common interest. And we have a crisis of neoliberalism. I'm in the meantime actually kind of hostile towards this term that never existed as a closed, as a unity of thinking. We have had these difficulties and differences there, and I think we have to work as well with this and saying they don't have, at least today, a strategy that is in common. And then I think what we have to look at is 2 things, if you want a positive thing. Another term I hugely dislike is, for instance, social investment. This came to my mind when it came to question of benefits and what we pay and how do we pay it. It is definitely, it's not for me social investment. I think we have to discuss this term of we are not investing in people to be productive. And we have this is another thing we actually have. We have with this actually an ongoing process of the old pre-capitalist system, the good, deserving poor, and the non-deserving poor. I think this is something where we have as well to be more careful in terms of addressing concrete questions, and we can do it in communities. What is the problem with this person? Why is he, she unemployed or whatsoever? And then the final point, coming to transition. I think there is a general tradition which we do not discuss sufficiently. It is as well a development of the mode of production and the means of production. We have something going on, and these seem to be very abstract terms, and they are in a way, but we have something where simply the technology we have today is developing in a way. I talked about abundance. I said, we have to talk about this. Why is everybody keen to get 40 hours into a job? I don't know how many years, 40 years or something. If we can do what Keynes said, what many economists said, we don't have to. We have resources. It's only a matter of using them in a smart way. We leave smartness to telephones. We shouldn't do that.